Time is 6:33 right now? Okay. Okay, that's it. Good evening. Thank you very much, folks, for joining us today. We have some repeat customers. Thank you so much for being here, taking time away from your day and evening for this third and last community meeting that we have about the topic of street sweeping in the city of West Covina. What I would like to do is to provide a broad background, brief background, and a broad overview of the street sweeping program in the city of West Covina. A little longer than 2 months ago, staff took a report before the city council to provide some general information about the status of its street sweeping program. Part of what local governments do on a routine basis is to evaluate the services that is provided to its residents in order to find out opportunities for efficiencies. What we do typically is to evaluate the effectiveness of the program and then see if there are any alternatives or options there to provide a service better, more effective. And this was exactly that same exercise. Staff was tasked by the city council to review its street sweeping program because it hadn't been reviewed in a while, for about 8 years. The last time it was looked at was in 2015. That's when, essentially, because of some budgetary constraints, the services, which at that time were 4 times a month to our residential streets, about every week, was cut back to half of that, which is every other week or twice a month. When we presented the item before the city council, one of the things that they focused on was that this topic is important enough for our residents, especially because we know there are parking challenges in the city of West Covina in the residential neighborhoods, that the topic should be discussed with the community. And we should seek the opportunity to receive the input of the community and then go back before the city council and present a final report for their consideration. By the way, tonight's meeting is also, our residents could watch it online. And for those of you who know, we are going to do a survey. And the survey, you could utilize your mobile phones if you're here, your devices where you're here, to take part in the survey, and the folks at home can do the same thing. The opportunity is there. So what we are trying to achieve tonight is, again, take a look at the current street sweeping program, take a look at the parking restrictions that are associated with street sweeping programs, and then finally get into the interactive survey that we just mentioned a minute ago. Clean roadways. That's a primary purpose for street sweeping. The appearance, cleaning the streets, and then the appearance of clean streets. Debris tend to, as you know, deposited along roadway gutters, and removal of debris prevents loose material to enter into the roadway, causing unsafe conditions for pedestrians and motorists. Prior to 1972, the primary focus of street sweeping programs was just that, to clean the streets and give the appearance of clean and safe streets. However, after the enactment in 1972 of a Clean Water Act, certain provisions had to be put in place by local governments in order to make sure that our waterways remain clean. A big element of that was to make sure that street sweeping programs are effective enough to make sure that pollutants do not end up in our receiving waterways. Pollutants gather in the streets, they get into the gutter area, and if they are not swept and taken off the roadways properly, they would find their ways into the catch basins into the storm drain systems that ultimately gets dropped into our receiving waters. So protection of environment through compliance with the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System became a primary focus of having and putting in place an effective street sweeping program. Also, as you know, if we do not take care of debris collected in the gutter area, they will find their way again into the catch basins. They clog up the catch basins. If they clog up the catch basins, there is a possibility of flooding and causing dangerous situation that flooding can cause. And of course, preventing damage to passing vehicles. If you have debris, rocks in the middle of the roadway, a car ahead of you drives a bit faster, they can easily damage the car behind them. So as far as the city of West Covina is concerned, the way we handle our street sweeping is by dividing the city into 5 sweeping zones. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a map that would illustrate which one those zones are. Those zones are essentially organized in a way that gives the opportunity to the street sweeping contractor to be able to sweep each area of the city of the 5 areas in a given day. So it's Monday through Friday. We have approximately 463 curb miles of streets located within the 5 zones in the city of West Covina that, as I indicated earlier, currently are being swept twice a month, Mondays through Fridays. However, you should note that the city's downtown gets swept twice a week on Mondays and Fridays. And all city-owned parking lots and the Civic Center parking lot where you park today and the parking structure, they get swept as well. The current street sweeping program was again established back in 2015. When we cut back from 4 times a month to 2 times a month, new routes were configured, and the program went into effect. Now, as you all know, the effectiveness and success of a street sweeping program hinges on the street sweeper having the ability, without any hindrance, to do its job and clean the street without having to confront parked vehicles. And in order to institute that, and in order to be able to have a parking enforcement program, you have to have posted signs with parking restrictions. Only 7% of our streets are posted for street sweeping signs at the current time. Without posted street sweeping signs, as you can imagine, there cannot be any enforcement. Majority of our residential streets are swept from 7 a.m. To 3 p.m., and commercial areas are swept during the early morning hours. Currently, the city does not, as I indicated, enforce the street sweeping parking restrictions, period. These are the 5 zones that we mentioned. If you can imagine, we will start on the east side of the city, west, southwest area, which is Monday. Then we move up to the northwest, which is Tuesday. We move to the east side. A big portion of the city gets swept on Wednesdays. The center is on Thursdays. And finally, the south end of town here gets swept on Fridays. When I indicated only 7% of the city streets are posted for street sweeping restrictions, these are the ones in sort of dark red are the streets that we have that are posted. Imagine this large area, or even the larger area in here, and you can sparsely see some street sweeping restrictions. As I indicated earlier, the most important impediment to having a street sweeping program, successful one, is the challenge of the street sweeper having to deal with parked cars. If you can imagine, I'm counting 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure if this is a driveway or not, but let's, for all intents and purposes, say we got about 100 feet in here. This street sweeper will not be able to sweep for at least a 100-foot stretch. And if each block is about 300 or 400 feet long, you can imagine on one side of the street, at least in this particular instant, 1/4 of that side is not going to get swept because of the parked vehicles. Now, what are the next steps? We wanted to ask and hopefully receive your input about the current issues that you have with the street sweeping program. What is it that you would like to see in an effective and efficient street sweeping program? And the needs. Do we want more than twice a week? Is there a need for having twice a month, going back to 4 times a month? More frequent, less frequent. Those are the kind of input that we would like to receive from you. And then if we receive the desire of the community as a whole, of course, this is going to be, again, as I said, our job is to gather all the information, put it in a report, final report, and present it to the City Council for a discussion. Now, if the ultimate decision is to change the current status by increasing, let's assume, by increasing the frequency of the street sweeping, then naturally we have to go back and work with the street sweeping program manager, the contractor that provides the street sweeping to the city of West Covina, and develop a revised route and schedule. Once you change the frequency, we have to revise the routes and the schedules. And then if we decide that the effectiveness of a successful street sweeping program hinges primarily on having a viable enforcement program for parking restrictions, then how we're going to go about that? And as I mentioned, currently we do not have that regime in place. We do not have a parking enforcement for street sweeping purposes. If we were to do that, what is it going to take? What does it entail? What does that program entail? What are some of the challenges, opportunities, and next steps? We've emphasized this quite a bit. Again, the success of an effective street sweeping program hinges primarily on proper enforcement of parking restrictions. In any service that we provide, we try to use the opportunity to optimize the service in order to provide bigger bang for the buck that we spend for our residents. Street sweeping is no exception. So how are we going to go about optimizing the street sweeping program routes and schedules with considerations of adjacent land use and future expansion of the city due to growth? Let me come back to this point. The needs of each residential, of each area of the city, and each city is different as far as street sweeping is concerned. It relies a lot on the makeup of the development in that particular residential neighborhood. If you have a residential neighborhood primarily with single-family homes, long driveways, and garages that could be utilized for parking the vehicles, the need of that particular community for parking restrictions is very different from, let's say, a particular residential neighborhood in the city that is primarily a multifamily residentials, apartments, duplexes, condominiums. We have to consider all of those factors when we do the study for devising a new route. Because, again, the ultimate goal is to have a successful program with minimizing the negative impact on our residents as far as the challenges of parking. Now, in order to establish a parking restriction program, we need to spend about $500,000 to install new signs. As I indicated, only 7% of our streets are signed, have signs installed for street sweeping purposes. And we have to spend about $250,000 to start a parking enforcement program. Officers, vehicles, instruments, readers, whatnot. And then we have to complete a survey of the street sweeping signs and plan for, obviously, if we go into that direction of installation, ultimately revise the City of West Covina Municipal Code, because currently we don't have clear language that is required to be in place in order to have an effective parking enforcement program. And then ultimately, whatever change we end up making, we need to monitor it and evaluate its effectiveness, and then adjust. Anytime you have a new program to go into place, you have to watch how you're doing it. And there are definitely some tweaks that you could make, some adjustments that you could make. So after appropriate length of time, we're going to come back and evaluate it, make sure that we have a successful program, and any adjustments that needs to be made will be made at that time. Now, as I indicated, we are going to take a survey. This was some basic information that I provided, and I think it gives you the basic background as to the current status of the street sweeping program and what we're trying to achieve, and then hopefully we'll be able to get your input. So I'm going to list. These are the addresses that you have to put into your devices to be able to take the poll. It's pollev.com, POLLEV, one word, .com. And once you get into that, then you have to put in the pass, which is Ideal Fog 205. Ideal Fog 205. I'm sorry? Sorry, I apologize. I'm not a technical person.
You're preventing people who don't want third-party information on their device.
Understood. So we're going to look at the first question. We're going to take a look at the response that we got for the first question. My apologies, sincere apologies. I meant to do that. My name is John Osqui. I'm a consultant that provides city engineering services to the City of West Covina. Thank you. No, for a company. The name of the company is Transtech. I think I mentioned it last time. You were in the audience. Thank you. Yes.
Where do we find out how many people actually participate? So 100% or 1 of 2 or 5 of 10. We don't know. Will that be available by public record request?
If we can get that, but
The poll to me means nothing if there's no statistics to go with.
I'm sure there's a way to probably extract that information. Maybe we don't have it currently available right now.
Answer this question. So if I'm the only one on that poll right
No, I understand your point, sir. Yeah, I understand. I'm gonna let me just read the question again. Do you know your street?
17%. Was that? One person was 17%. I'm logging in right now.
So do you know your street sweeping day and time? 100% replied yes. One said no.
The percentages mean nothing if you don't know how many people do it. There's 5 people voting right now. Yeah.
The next question is, can you park on your property on street sweeping day?
That's what I'm trying to watch. 5.
It appears that majority of people have a way to find.
That technology. We do it old school. Is there a state feature that allows people?
Let me just say that what I would intend to do is to go through the questions and then provide the opportunities for us to have a conversation. I think we can run through a more effective meeting that way. Can you park on your property on your street sweeping days? Majority of the people answered yes, 86% to 14%, which they said they couldn't find a way to park. Driveway, garage, legal parking.
To answer your first question, for the first question regarding you know your street sweeping day, there was a total of. For this question, we have a total of.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, yeah, well, that's actually.
Third question, in your area on street sweeping day, is it generally easy to find parking and move vehicles? Again, the majority of the respondents said yes. They can. So, majority of the people agree that generally it is easy to find parking and move vehicles. Next question. Question number 4. How clean do you find your neighborhood streets to be? 3 is very clean, and if it's not clean at all, it's a 1. So it's half and half. About 50% say it's, well, now it's 1/3 of each category. So 33% think that it's very clean, 33% think that the streets are not clean enough, and then we have another, okay, it changes. 29, majority of the people think that it's in between. Not very clean and not very dirty, somewhere in the middle, 43%. Question number 5, how clean do you notice city streets citywide? This is not just in your neighborhood. Citywide, how clean are the streets in general? 50%, okay. 50%, again, it's sort of mirrors the answer to the last question, which is 50% think that it's in between, not very clean, not dirty. Well, it changed. Okay, we'll just give it a minute for folks to figure it out. Okay, we're going to settle on the 50% think that about half of the respondents think that the city streets are somewhere in between, not very clean, not very dirty. 17% they think that it's very clean, and 33% think that it is not clean. This is a general question. Are you satisfied with the current street sweeping schedule on your street? This is for the residential streets. Again, this is twice a month, every other week. Majority of the people are saying that they are satisfied with the frequency of the service, which is twice a month. 67% said they are satisfied. 33% obviously they are not. To address the cleaner city streets as a resident, would you be open to increasing street sweeping program from the bi-monthly or twice a month to weekly, 4 times, as it was prior to 2015? It's actually bi-weekly. Current is bi-weekly, not bi-monthly. It's twice a month. So it appears that majority of folks want to keep the same frequency, and they don't have a desire to increase the service. Oh. Question number 8. Parked vehicles during street sweeping hours are the biggest challenge for an effective sweeping program. To help ensure streets are accessible during street sweeping days, would you be amenable to parking restrictions?
I skipped to 8. Yeah, we're at 8. Well, I'm at 7, but we need to be at 8.
So it appears that majority of the folks are in favor, at least majority of the folks that are responding to this question, are in favor of putting into place a parking restriction program and enforcement program for street sweeping. That's it. That's it. Thank you very much for participating in the survey. If you have any questions that I may be able to answer, or if you have any comments, this is the time for that. Please, ma'am.
We do have parking restrictions. It's been that way for a long, long time. It's posted. You are in error saying they do not
Would
take.
you like to repeat it because some folks are not hearing you?
He can hear it.
Yeah, but online you can't.
We do have parking restriction signs on my streets, but you are in error. They were ticketing. The guys come around at 7 a.m., the traffic people, the young guys, and they ticket any of the cars that are out there. And then the street sweeper comes about 10. So they were ticketing. They haven't ticketed for a while, but they are ticketing. One house especially, and I only have 7 houses on my street, has been hit twice for the same car because they have too many cars on their property.
How long ago, ma'am?
6 months maybe.
Something that definitely we're going to look into, because as I understand it, there is no enforcement for street sweeping.
I have a couple questions. During your presentation, you talked about a successful street sweeping program. How is that defined?
Clean streets and compliance with all the regulations that are in place. Those are some of the matrices we follow.
That doesn't answer the question. How do you define successful street sweeping program? Is it pollutants going into the waterways? What is the definition of? Let's say we swept the streets every day. What is it measured against?
When I mentioned compliance with the regulations, it was exactly that. Compliance with the NPDES regulations. We are under a permit with the County of Los Angeles, which has put in place specific measurements for different communities. For example, in southeast Los Angeles area, closer to Los Angeles River, they are trash total maximum daily loads, TMDLs. We do not have that in this area. However, there are other pollutants that we have, TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, that we have to measure and monitor and make sure they don't end up in our waterways.
Again, how is that determined? Is it somebody goes and looks at the trash in the street sweeper, or how is it determined? You're telling me what has to be done. So the next question that follows that is, can somebody show me how we've been out of compliance with that since 2015?
Out of compliance.
What's a successful program? Apparently, ours isn't successful if we're changing it. If we're street sweeping twice a day and we're within those rules, why do we need to change it?
That's precisely why we wanted your input, sir. First of all, we are not out of compliance. We are in compliance. When we're talking about compliance, it's compliance with existing regulations put in place. And we are in full compliance with all the requirements of the permit that is issued by the state. So the city of, let me answer this gentleman, sir. The city of West Covina is in full compliance. Now, as far as what are the tools to measure, one way is to visual inspections and then measuring the amount of trash and debris that is collected by the street sweeper. That's another way. The second thing is to measure which we do on a quarterly basis, the amount of pollutants that are put out. As I indicated to you, the city of West Covina is in full compliance. To me, those two measures prove to you that we have an effective street sweeping program. Now, you can have an effective program, but you want to make it better if there is a need for it. And that's why we mentioned at the outset that what we are trying to find out is an input from you folks to tell us if it's enough, if it's not enough, how often it should be swept, and if it's not enough, are there other ways of having a more effective program other than increasing the frequency? And I think the response was gearing towards parking restrictions. Make sure that cars are not parked in there so the street sweeper can do its job.
What about if it's in a red zone?
Did you have a question, sir? Did you have a question? Did you have anybody? Please.
What speed are they supposed to drive at? My first question. Second question is, how do they judge that the commercial area of West Covina gets 2 days a week instead of residential? I own a business in West Covina, and I'm in a red zone. No one parks on my street. And they come by maybe once every other month, and I know my schedule.
The average speed of a street sweeper is about 7 to 8 miles an hour. And typically in the commercial zones as I mentioned, they come in very early in the morning.
They come at 3 o'clock in the morning at my place.
Yeah, 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock is usually that's where the program is.
Driving 15 miles an hour down my street, and after they go, and I see the trash still there, that's not effective.
No, I agree with you. If they are going faster than that, it's not an effective measure. So I would appreciate it if you would please call it in the day of, so we can get a hold of the street sweeper, bring it up to their attention to make sure that we're going to make the corrections that we need to put in place. I would appreciate that. Ma'am, you had a question.
I've been to the previous one, and at the previous one, the issue of increasing the frequency has an additional cost. Would you, for everybody, just go over what you said in the past, where they're looking for the money? Is it coming from us residents or elsewhere? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's important to address that question. As far as the paying for the cost of putting up signs, $500,000. those funds could be, those expenses could be allocated by utilizing what is called Measure W funds. Measure W funds are generated by the County of Los Angeles. They were put in place about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, for the sole purpose of assisting to maintain clean waters. And they are discretionary funds and they are non-discretionary funds. Some of the discretionary funds comes back to the cities every year. And from those proceeds, we can allocate enough funds in order to be able to pay for the $500,000 cost of installing parking restriction signs. Thank you for bringing up that question.
I'm still confused about we're in full compliance. So let's change the program. If we're in full compliance, how is sweeping more often going to improve what's there? The measurements. I'm just, instead of picking up 2 weeks' worth, I'm going to pick up a week's worth. What are we improving except the bottom line of the street sweeping company?
You know, judging by the response that we got, I forgot which question it was, but the majority of the people thought that,
There are 5 or 6.
well, I'm just relying on the information that we discussed tonight.
That's the whole point.
Sir, you ask me a question. You ask a question from me. Please allow me to answer, and if there is any...
There was one that was there that obviously said, we don't want to. You're not even mentioning that.
You asked a question, and here, let me repeat your question. You said, if we are in compliance, why do we need to add to the frequency? What are we going to get out of it? Right? What more can we get out of it? I'm going back to what I saw a few minutes ago, which said our streets are not clean enough. So, yeah, we may be in compliance with the regulations as far as the total maximum daily load of certain pollutants are concerned. However, if some folks in here think that streets are not clean enough appearance-wise, because that's what they are judging, the streets appear not to be clean enough. If that's the response, they may think that by increasing the frequency of street sweeping, then that may help to the appearance of having cleaner streets. Yes, sir.
First of all, the streets aren't clean enough because of the parking on the streets on street sweeping day. Twice a month is plenty, okay? And if there was parking restrictions, the streets would be perfect, not perfectly clean, but the streets would be clean, okay? The street sweeper comes down my street every 2 weeks on a Monday, same time. I have no problem moving my car. The funny thing is, I have a neighbor. She has 3 or 4 grandkids living with her and a daughter living with her, and they all have cars. Well, quite a few years ago, when I had 3 kids living at home, and they had cars, she would knock on my door every Monday morning and say, or not every Monday, but street sweeping day, say, are you going to move your cars so they can sweep? Guess who now has cars in front of the house and doesn't move them on street sweeping day? Okay? And the way they're parked, like you said, 100 feet, they have to go around the cars, and they miss most of in front of my house. So another thing is my daughter lives in Santa Barbara, and they have street sweeping every week, but one side of the street on a Tuesday, the other side on a Wednesday, because they have a lot worse parking problems there than we have. So, I know in my neighborhood, they can move their cars because we just had our street resurfaced last week, so there was no cars on the street. So,
Thank you, sir, for the points that you brought up. I do want to share with you that the same comments that you made today was shared by the folks that participated in the first couple of meetings. They determined that the issue of parked cars is not allowing us to have as effective of a program that we potentially could have even with the twice a month street sweeping. Yes, sir.
So I have a few things. First First of all, can we go back to the picture on the slideshow of the sweeper going around the cars? That's it. So in this picture here, we're showing one street in an entire city that fits a narrative of doing this. But I want to point out the one detail. Does anyone notice that the curb behind the cars that are parked is clean? Okay, I just wanted to make sure everyone noticed that. So my point is just because there's cars parked on a street does not always mean that the curb is dirty or has trash going down anywhere. Are there some? I absolutely agree that there are some streets. Probably this gentleman here who just spoke is the perfect example of using the application program here at the City of West Covina to apply for parking permits or street sweeping permits for his street alone without applying an effective policy citywide that is only effective for 10% of the residents, because the other residents in the city are not having this problem. And this is a perfect example of a city, and I'm assuming it's not West Covina, because that doesn't look like an environmental waste truck that from Environmental Waste Services, or whoever it is that uses our street, nationwide, sorry. So I would imagine this is from some random city, not West Covina. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is possible to have cars parked on a street and have clean gutters and storm systems. Couple questions, so I'm going to ask, you had mentioned in your bullet points, and I think it was the first or second slide, that one of the things that an effective street sweeping program does is it keeps rocks out of the road so that cars are not damaged. Are we sweeping the curbs, or are we sweeping where the cars drive? Because if we're sweeping where the cars drive, then you're right, we're keeping rocks off of the road and they're putting them in the street sweeper and they're not going in the car's windows. But if you're sweeping the gutters, then the rocks in the middle of the road where people actually drive are still a road hazard. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out there. Thank you. Common sense, right? It's something. It was his argument for doing this, and it's on his saying. I don't necessarily disagree with you to that, but it was his argument, and it's flawed. Also, sweeping at 7 a.m. means more cars are parked in front of their homes because people haven't left for work yet. So again, we're looking at a wonderful street here. And if this picture is facing south, this is early in the morning because the shadows are facing the west, which means that it's probably early enough that people are still parked at home and haven't left for work, which means there's more cars parked on the street. If they'd sweep at 10 a.m., maybe more people have left and there are less cars parked on the street, and that could solve that problem. So again, just changing the times with the current thing and without adding a parking enforcement would solve that problem. So the biggest offended areas that I see in the city are high-density housing areas, whether it be apartments, townhomes, multi-use, but it's where they've taken the zoning and have taken it from residential single-family home to residential 30 families in a home. And that's the difference. So those areas, I can completely see we need to address those areas and go to those apartment managers and work on parking restrictions maybe in those areas. But again, you can't take a policy that affects 100% of the people to solve a solution that only affects 10 to 15% of the people. And so I don't understand why we're even talking about a parking restriction. And to Mr. Shoemaker's credit, you mentioned the poll. 7 people of 110,000 does not make a statistic. There is not a single place in this world that would tell you that that statistic is reputable. They would tell you that that's a joke. So saying that 7 people, 3 people, 4 people voted that streets are a little dirty, you're not getting a response. Are you going to get it from 100,000 people? The answer is no, but you're not going to take 7 people and make a decision. Judging by this, no one's doing this online either. And then finally, stormwater is the issue. So you're dealing with water going down the curbs. At $500,000 to implement signs around the city, why don't we put some actual grates that filter out debris over the storm drains so that we don't have to worry about it going into it? And now your tons of loads of trash that you're not measuring, we can actually stop at the curb level. And the same example, we can have people go around and make sure that's clean. So I don't understand why we have to increase sweeping. I don't understand why we have to do parking enforcement for the whole city when we don't need it for more than maybe 15 or 20% of the city. So those are kind of a whole hodgepodge of questions, and boy, I can't wait for your answer.
Thank you very much. I didn't get a chance to write them all down, but let me try. Let me try to answer them as I remember. First of all, this street is in West Covina, city of West Covina, the picture that you see. There are many more of that. There are some clips that we also videoed of the parked vehicles that is preventing the street sweeper to do its job. So it's common knowledge that, again, having parked cars on the street will not allow the street sweeper to do its job that we are paying for it. Your last question as far as trash collection devices, actually the city in its capital improvement program in the next 2 years has set aside enough money from the Measure W funds, not from the general fund, to insert those devices. Those are for collecting trash, not necessarily collecting pollutants, fine particulates that would end up even with having those devices inserted into the catch basins. As far as your next question, sir, you had 7. So let me answer your questions, the ones that you had that I haven't answered.
So why are we doing a policy for 100% of the city?
No, I don't know if 15% is right or 100%. You know, I don't know the 15%, what the basis of the 15% is.
So we
but
don't know if 40% is accurate either.
What 40%? No, the poll, sir. Again, the desire was to get as much as information as we potentially can from our residents. Now, we did 3, this is a 3rd community meeting, and this one, the council also made it a mandate for us to make it open to everyone so that they can watch it from home and participate in the surveys. I would have hoped that we would get more participation, but then again, if you're asking folks to participate and we are not getting the response that we want, I'm not sure what else could be done.
Perfect.
There are only 3 people watching right now online.
So if I could see that for a second. So here's a picture of a street in West Covina that was taken on street sweeping day. Can you tell me how many cars are parked on that street?
No,
It looks like just one to me. Can you verify that?
Yeah, there is one, but there are a whole number of other streets that we are having challenges, as indicated by some of the folks in this very room that parked cars essentially are.
But there's a whole bunch of streets that are.
There are some streets that there are people park on their driveways or in their garages as they should on the street sweeping days, and there are a number of streets that people do not do that. Is there a challenge, particularly more when the zoning is more dense housing, apartments and condos? I mentioned to you, yes, there is a challenge. Sir, question?
Nice to see you again. Likewise. Where's your accent from? Okay. All right. I just want to try to envision the code enforcement piece of this, if I may. Because I've heard you say that there's going to be a code enforcer that's going to follow around the street sweeper. Is that correct?
We actually happen to have the man
It would be nice to have. It would be nice to have code enforcement involved in this because I've noticed his
I can
presence
answer that, JD.
in each meeting.
representative is here. If you have another question,
Wait, I haven't asked my question.
I will get to you. If you have other questions that I can answer, I would like to answer those, and then we'll get the gentleman to
I
comment.
can't get to my other questions until I either get an answer from you or from that gentleman.
You can ask your question and I'll answer.
Very good. Oh, no, my first question is, are you going to have code enforcement following around the street sweeper routinely in order to enforce restricted parking?
At this time, we're still looking at how we're going to be implementing our parking enforcement for the street sweeper. Having either a police officer, which other communities do, or a code enforcement officer follow street sweeper is common practice. So that's an option that we may pursue once we finalize our plan.
Or both, I would imagine, which is probably a good option as well. Both police and code enforcement. But here's my real concern. If you're currently not enforcing parking violations routinely, why am I to believe that you're going to do this come street sweeping day throughout the city? I'll give you an example. After our last meeting, there was illegally parked cars, as you may or may not know, at the high school, where there is signage that says no parking anytime from here to down there. There were parked cars all along that road, causing other cars to swerve over to avoid getting into an accident. There were other cars that were parked in the red. 2 weeks prior to that, there were 3 consecutive days of illegally parked cars throughout the high school, the park, and all the residents that live in that area. And not one ticket, I can almost guarantee, was issued during those 4 days that I've shared with you. So why would I believe that enforcement is going to happen now? Or is it just going to be kind of a hit and miss style of enforcement? How is code enforcement actually going to follow through on this consistently and fairly?
As I mentioned, we're still developing our plan. I think right now we're gathering information from the residents as to what the concerns are in each area. Each community has different characteristics. But if you see a car that's being parked violating a parking rule, you can always report it. Our code enforcement officers have been helping our police department in citing vehicles that are parked illegally, parked in red, parked in handicap. As John also mentioned, a lot of the parking or street sweeping right now, the parking restrictions are, I think you said 7% of the entire city. So that's not something that we can currently enforce until we put up the proper signage. Once we put up the proper signage, we notify the residents and we let them know, give them a fair warning, whatever changes may be. Maybe it's the same day, but give them a warning period where we work with our residents to accommodate the changes in street sweeping. But we will be creating or implementing a street sweeping parking restriction program, and we're going to be trying to address, making sure that we're enforcing those parking restrictions in our community.
Okay, thank you. Do you know now whether you're going to be doing alternative days for restricted parking, as that gentleman cited earlier, where it'll be one day on Tuesday, the opposite side on Wednesday, and will also the street sweeping have a set time that restrictive parking is enforced? For example, between 12 and 3, so anyone parked after 3, or if they get lucky and park before 3 and don't get caught, they get away with not receiving the ticket. Is that been determined? You can answer that.
As I indicated to you, sir, we have to take a look at the entire operation. Once we decide which way we're going to go, we have to take a look at the routes. Looking at the routes means also that we have to take a look at how we're going to do that. Is alternate days an answer? It could be. In some neighborhoods, it could be that it's different in other neighborhoods. Again, the makeup of the neighborhood, the type of housing that you have, the type of residential units that you have is going to dictate how we're going to revise and devise the plan. Because again, the bottom line is this: we want to minimize the negative impact on the folks' ability to be able to park on the street if there is a need for them to park on the street. As far as the hours that you mentioned, whatever is posted, that's the restriction. Now, I think you were at the last meeting, the question came up, and I answered that. Let's say it's 7 to 11. The street sweeping hours are 7 to 11. If the sweeper comes in at 9 o'clock and sweeps the streets, and you happen to see the sweeper has gone by, and you notice that, and you park your car in front of your home, although it is within that window of 7 to 11, you're not going to be ticketed. Because the purpose of no parking on the street is for the street sweeper to be able to do his job. It's not penalizing people who park if the street sweeper has been able to do his job. So typically, they don't get ticketed.
So if I can add to that, John, that's also the benefit if we do the program where the either police officer or code enforcement officer follows the street sweeper, because that's when they'll be going around and ticketing and not coming back later in the afternoon. And just because I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time, we'll follow up with these last questions. Thank you.
I have a
I'm sorry.
I have just a couple of questions. How often do you empty? How often do they empty the sweeper? Because you have the big, huge magnolia trees in our area, and there's always a lot of debris. Second thing, we have a major school there, and they park there like this on all the streets. There's only one street where there is no parking. That's where everybody that parks on the street goes and parks on the other street because they know they're not going to. Are you going to now take that street away?
Forgive me for not knowing exactly the location that you're talking about. But again, once we go back in order to revise the routes, all of those factors are going to be considered. There are several factors that is going to assist with us keeping clean streets and street effective sweeping program. One of which is keeping the city trees trimmed properly. And as far as
Not north of the freeway.
Not south of the freeway either.
the city provides that service, by the way, tree trimming.
It is pretty bad.
Yeah. And your other question was how often do they? It's every day. The sweeper, when they pick up and they have maxed out as far as collecting, because it's a vacuum system. It gets collected in the back of the vehicle. They go to the street yard, the public works yard, to do that, and then it gets transferred over to the dump site.
Oh. Looking at the next steps, identify the community's current issues, desires, and needs. That's good. Develop revised routes and schedules to optimize street sweeping. Really good. Implement installation of citywide street sweeping parking restrictions. How can you do that if you haven't done 1 and 2 yet? You haven't, you're saying you need to identify the current issues, and then the third thing you're going to do is implement installation of citywide street sweeping parking signs. You've already made the decision. Then the fourth one is establish a street sweeping parking enforcement program and enforcement grace period. You've already come to the conclusion. How do you know you need any of those two? You have to do number 1 first.
Isn't that what we're doing tonight? And
why would you even have 3 and 4 on there if you haven't come to the conclusion? Because you don't know. It said implement installation of citywide street sweeping parking restriction signs.
Sir, because we have heard from other residents other than you, including tonight.
So this was not shown in 1 and 2, the first and second meeting.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. But those are.
Right.
And there are residents that I was surprised at how much some want to street sweep.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you haven't done number 1, how do you already have number 3 and 4?
Sir,
Your admission that you had it at the first meeting tells me that you've come to a conclusion.
No, sir. Let me answer your question, please, and you can add to that.
What I wanted to add is these are next steps. This is not something that we've finalized. As John said tonight, the first step that we're doing is getting community input, and that's why we're here. That's why we want to get your feedback. All these concerns that you raised, we're going to, take into consideration. We develop the plan. There's various steps that we have to move forward with, and at the end of the day, we have to take it back to City Council.
3 and 4 shouldn't be there if that's what you're saying.
Would you like us to? We can change the word implement to.
We already know what's going to be done. We already know what's going to be done.
The fact is, as
Make sure these guys get more money.
I don't make any money, sir. For the record,
Because they cover it up the health department shortfall.
I don't make any money off of street sweeping operations, sir. Number 1.
You're doing the study, aren't you?
Please.
For me, the biggest concern I have on this is the code enforcement following the street sweeper and paying full-time salary to drive around and do this. If it was abandoned, I think it is a done deal. I'm not going to argue that, okay? I live in the city. Right. I think there's
Well, thank you. These are the sort of inputs and ideas that we wanted to gather to share with the City Council in that report. Now, the 3 meetings that we've had today has not been the only forum that has been provided to folks to express their opinion about effectiveness of street sweeping and parking enforcement, right? We have heard outside of these meetings that made us to have reasons to believe that a number of people are of the opinion that having parked cars is not going to allow street sweeper to do its job. And parking enforcement, enforcing parking. Now, I don't know how we're going to enforce it. We haven't come up to that solution yet. We haven't planned it yet. Is it, code enforcement officer is going to follow it every day? We don't know that. All we know is that we've heard from folks that enforcing parking is going to force people to pay attention to the street sweeping hours, do not park where they're not supposed to park during the period of time they're not supposed to park, allow the street sweeper to do its job.
Okay. 3 questions. First one, who initiated this? Was it citizen complaints? Was it city council saying we want a street sweeping program? Was it TransTech, advising, saying, hey, you need a sweeping program? Who started this? To John's point, because we're in compliance. At the moment, we're in compliance. So who started this?
First of all, TransTech didn't initiate this request.
Okay.
We were asked to participate in assisting the city with collecting the data, analyzing information, so forth and so on, number 1. Number 2, staff was tasked. It was an open council meeting. There was a report that was prepared for the city council to evaluate its street sweeping program. When we provided that information and provided that report to the city council was the one that said staff needs to go back to the community.
Who initiated staff to write that report? Was that a city manager initiation?
City manager is the authority that gets, city manager implements the policies of the city.
Okay. It was
Right.
initiated by a city
Administrator.
We have homeless problems, we have graffiti problems, we have crime
Yes.
problems.
We're dealing the one with they
We
have
have to
compliance
deal with
with.
the one that we're in compliance with.
Right. If you could comment on, you were speaking on Measure W, which I see here, but also looking at the budget, that there is a special revenue fund, sewer maintenance. Says this fund supports the city's street sweeping program. I'm not sure if it fully supports it or if it's just partially supported. And maintains that the city's sewer system. The city also provides services to the city of Covina through this fund. So what percentage of the street sweeping program does this sewer maintenance take care of?
I am not privy to the exact. I would be happy to take your name and information and go back and study the budget book. I'm sorry, I don't have that information top of my head.
Okay.
I'll be happy to share that information with you if you provide your name and number, please.
Okay. And the last question with regards to $250,000 to implement a parking enforcement program. Now, currently, my understanding is that there are parking enforcement programs as an elective for people that decided to group in a neighborhood. We want parking enforcement, so that street sweeping or whatever the case is. So you already have an enforcement program in place. So why would you need $250,000 to create a program that already exists?
Because in order to be able to enforce the parking restrictions for street sweeping hours throughout the city, you need additional resources. So the resources that we have in place right now is not adequate to address the street sweeping program enforcement, parking enforcement. I mean, it's like monitoring 10 or 15% of the parking prohibition in the city, whatever those are that they are doing it currently, and expanding it to 100% of the area of the city. It requires additional resources. What do you mean street sweeping is happening? No. No. Street sweeping, no. We currently have a street sweeping program for the residential units. Residential streets are, no, this is not a program. This is a conversation. This is a whole conversation that we started about 2.5 months ago. It was discussed in front of the city council, and the city council, again, asked us to go back to folks to bring it up and garner their ideas and inputs and needs and put it all together, that information, take it back before the city council for them to discuss it more and consider to whatever they want to make a decision on.
Non-official response. I've been in all 3 meetings, you've been in all 3 meetings. You feel this thing is favorable or not favorable?
Sir, I don't have any idea. All I'm going to do is to put together the data with the rest of the staff and present it to the city council and try to put in all the information that we received in there. We record it, we have this information, and then put it in a final report and bring it back to the city council for, look, whatever decision, the best decisions that we can make, city council or otherwise, are informed decisions. And the city council wants to make informed decisions. And in order to be able to do that, we have asked, sir. Sir, we want to focus on the
We can get to the next
street
question.
sweeping.
Here.
Why is this only about residential? Why is it concerning commercial businesses as well? Because I own a commercial business. I own 2 businesses in West Covina. And this whole meeting has been just residential. You, out of your mouth, you've only said business one time at the beginning of yours.
Sir, we are going to take a look at the entire program, residential and commercial. However, you have to realize that the majority of the challenges that we have are in the residential streets that are not properly getting swept because of the parked cars. Typically, you don't have, as you know, many parked cars at 3 a.m. in the commercial corridors. So there is no necessarily a challenge with parked cars and a street sweeper not being able to do its job on a commercial corridor between 3 to 7 a.m. That's why.
So why does the city get cleaned, or the city areas get cleaned twice a week, and not the commercial areas, or where there's businesses?
I'm sorry, say that question again.
So why does the city get cleaned twice a week? City properties get cleaned?
Residential streets.
No, city property.
Oh, city properties. Okay.
And not the commercial buildings.
Commercial buildings.
Correct. If there's no residents on a certain street, why don't they get cleaned twice a week? Where they're bringing in revenue for the city. I bring a lot of revenue in for the city. My TOT is a lot.
I'm sorry, Paulina, did you grasp the question?
Your question is, why are we street sweeping more frequently cities or city properties and not streets?
No.
Or not commercial areas?
Commercial areas in the city.
We do street sweep commercial areas in the city.
What, once every other month?
No.
How often?
I think weekly.
Not weekly basis. 100% it's not.
It's a weekly basis. Could you go back to that slide?
My security cameras, you could tell me if they've been there twice a week.
Sir, as I indicated last time, you mentioned that they're driving at 15 miles an hour, going fast. Because of that, they are not sweeping the streets correctly. If you see that they are not there every week, please let us know. This is something that...
No, they're not there every week.
Give us the location, your exact location, and we'll be making a call to them tomorrow morning, first thing, because, yeah, it's not right and it needs to be corrected if that's the case. Yeah, we'll get your information. Thank you.
So we can wrap up the meeting, but you're free to stay behind. Everyone has had it. You guys can stay and ask questions. Two more questions then. Okay.
Questions, and you're really not answering the questions. What you're doing is you're kind of saying, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And that's acceptable, but the thing is, you've hired a consultant, and you would think that you would have done a little homework ahead of time and had at least some tentative answers or responses to some of these concerns the residents have. Now, this is an existing program, as you say. So what you're really doing is expanding it. According to that survey, from what I see, there may be a question or two that may favor. In fact, I think overall, in general, every resident that lives in West Covina favors the expansion of this program because everybody wants their front of their house clean. But I think people that are involved and that realize the issues that exist in the city, the lack of policing, when you come along with wanting to expand a program like street cleaning over some of the other priorities, when in fact, this small sample survey that you've done here seems to indicate that people are satisfied. Some that have attended the meeting seem, even myself, I want to see the front of my house clean more often. I live next to that high school. But I also realize that there's a responsibility that all of us have, and apparently we're keeping up to it because the city is by and large generally clean, as the survey indicates. As the survey indicates, people are generally satisfied. So why are we so convinced that we need to expand this program?
Sir, no one is convinced that anyone is going to expand the program tomorrow. That's not. As I indicated, there is a. No, there is no. I didn't say we're going to expand the program. I said we are going to take a look at it, evaluate it. The council wanted us to come back before the whole body, to show them the input that we have received from the community, so that the community, you express your opinions about it, and present all the information that we have gathered so they can make the decision about what needs to be done with the program. It's not a foregone conclusion. Let me reiterate, it is not a foregone conclusion. Okay? So that's that. Now, the focus of what we have done is just to focus on the street sweeping program on its own, not necessarily comparing it to the other competing, quote-unquote, competing needs of the city. That's a discussion that has not been incorporated into this conversation because we were solely looking at the street sweeping program, trying to gather information and be able to provide that information to the city council. Now, the city council, I'm sure, if it decides to discuss this, it's going to be an open meeting and you all can express your ideas about how to spend the money, either on street sweeping or not street sweeping or other programs or competing needs and so forth and so on. But that's not the purpose of tonight's meeting. That's not for me and you to discuss about the merits of other programs that takes priority over street sweeping, potential expansion of street sweeping. This gentleman had a question. I'll go.
I have a follow-up. You gave that gentleman plenty of time, so I'm not sure why you're... Yeah, thank you. You're my friend for that purpose. You've spoken about restrictions, you've spoken about fines, you've spoken about frequency. So you have some sort of plan in your mind. In somebody's mind, there's already a plan. And apparently, some suspect that's already been a foregone conclusion as to what you're going to do. According to what you shared with us, I have concerns, for example, and it was mentioned after I asked the question that you say you weren't sure of, but yet it was mentioned, and Mrs. Patras brought it up as well, a code enforcer following the street cleaner. That seems very inefficient, right? And not to mention, so when he stops off to give a ticket, what's the sweeper going to do? Wait until the ticket is issued to begin sweeping the street? It makes no sense. But these are the ideas that you as a consultant have shared with the residents at all three meetings. Now, I understand that there's been opposition to those ideas, but just saying we don't have an answer or that's what we want to hear is really not satisfying for the residents. Because at the end, you're going to hand over a report to the city council. They're either going to vote up or down on it, and we're going to get stuck living with it. So this is the only opportunity residents have. And those few of us have come out. You should at least be willing to give us more time and not lock us into this 30 minutes, because that's really what the residents are getting at these meetings, with very few answers. I think that's not what the city council, at least Mr. Cantos, Councilman Cantos, really requested for you to do as a consultant. Having said that, what is your role in this process? You're the consultant, but are you going to develop the plan or just write a report?
So, John, I'll answer that. So, John is hired through our... I am Paulina Morales. I'm the acting city manager. So John is with TransTech. He is with our engineering contract. So he provides our engineering services. So he was not hired specifically to put a report together regarding street sweeping. It's part of an engineering role, and that's why he's working with us in this regard in this project. As far as it being a foregone conclusion as to what we're moving forward with, I mean, we have not gotten direction from council other than what we are doing here today, gathering information from the community, and we're going to be putting that together. Ms. Poitras came up with a great request, and we're going to acquiesce that request. We're going to have a community meeting once we have a plan that includes the revised routes, the revised dates, and that way the community will have an opportunity to look at what we're going to be presenting to the council before it goes to the council, so that we can get more community feedback on that plan before it's presented before the city council. And I think there's another question that I missed, or did I answer your questions? As far as what the council wants, as John mentioned multiple times, we did have a public hearing or public meeting in which they voiced what they wanted, and the direction that they gave was to do community meetings and gather information. If there's any changes to the street sweeping program, it would require going back to the council to expand the program or to change it. The city council? They did. I think that they mentioned it at that council meeting. The survey is not to do anything other than get input from the community.
The direction of the city council was go back to the community to figure out, and I think one of the slides alluded to that, figure out input by identifying the needs of the community and the desires of the community. I think that's, if I remember correctly, that's exactly how they worded it. Go back to the community, find out what are the desires, what are the exact needs, and if they have any suggestions of how to go about it. So that was the general direction. You have a question, sir?
Yeah. So I've a question and a comment, and I'm not sure if Paulina or you will answer. But the city currently has a mechanism, as Mario pointed out, and I pointed out earlier, that somebody can apply for street sweeping parking restrictions on their street if they have problems with street sweeping, keeping their curbs or gutters clean. There's a mechanism. And if the city is really animate about wanting this to be done right, why don't they waive the fee for that, which is minimal to begin with, so that residents that do want it can actually apply for it for the streets that need it. And then those residents on that street actually make a vote if they want it on their street. Again, we're looking at implementing 100% citywide policy for something that only is a problem in a small percentage of the city. And we can use whatever percentage we want to use. We can use whatever survey we want to use. But the one thing we can't use is these questions, because all of these questions don't give the true answer. Everybody wants clean streets. There's nobody up here going to go, no, I want trash in front of my street. But to ask the question, do you think we have a good street sweeping program? Well, like the gentleman over here pointed out, he doesn't think we have a good street sweeping program because they're not sweeping in front of his business. And so in his mind, he has a problem. I don't have that problem. So in my mind, the street sweeping's fine. I don't have cars parking in front of my seat. But the right. But the participation here is only about 10 or 15 people, right? It's only about 10 or 15 people at most that have participated in this. I haven't been to all 3 meetings. I wish I could, but I have other jobs. The issue is it's usually the same people that come to council. So it's 8, 10 people, and I know all of you in the room except for one. So, I mean, it's all the same people. The issue is I don't want parking restrictions in front of my house for street sweeping. I absolutely do not want it. I don't have an issue in my neighborhood to warrant it. So then why would I want that implementation in front of my street? The gentleman over there, I fully support the fact that you probably would like it if it is a problem, but you're having an issue of them showing up. The issue is there's no one issue in this city for street sweeping that's an all-in-one solution. And the problem is we're trying to make an all-in-one solution for something that doesn't require an all-in-one solution. We have a solution available. If it's an issue, like I said, waive the fee for the survey of that street. If it's a problem, let them vote on it. But I can tell you right now, not everyone agrees with that. There may be a handful, like the gentleman was earlier, that says, absolutely, I support it. Perfect. Apply for it and see if your neighbors support your decision. If they do, it works. I have overnight parking restriction in front of my house. I've had it for over 20 years. We had it because we have apartments that park nearby. It didn't solve our problem. They still park in front of our houses. They still leave trash in front of our houses. So for 20 years after doing it, we have a parking restriction and we still have a problem. Yeah, it'll go away and come back every few months, but the problem didn't go away. And this is going to be no different. And that's why I don't understand why we're trying to make a policy, and I say it again, that affects 100% of the people when only a small percentage are having the problem. That's my biggest issue.
Thank you for your input, sir.
I have one little question. You made the remark earlier that we've had 3 meetings, and you've received input from other sources. What are those other sources? We've had 3 public meetings, and you referenced you've gotten information from other.
Prior to,
What are those?
Prior to the 3 meetings, which was as a result of the report that we took before the City Council, we have had information. I don't know how, who, I don't collect that information, sir. People complaining about street sweepers not being able to do their job because of parked vehicles. That's the extent of it.
Even if there's not parked vehicles, they're not public requests.
There's, this may help. There's people that go on Facebook, they complain about street sweeping. There are people that, I'll repeat, there's people that post on Facebook and Nextdoor about complaints about it. Right. Parking and stuff. And there's people that go to us directly to the city council members and the former city manager, I think. So,
But see, even
whether
you know
that is what happens. I don't
I'm not saying, but somehow there's nothing that's showing us where that information came from. It's kind of like, we all go to meetings and things like that, and isn't it absolutely amazing how every one of our city council members only get comments that support them? They never say, I had 10 people last week walk up to me and tell me I was an idiot.
My councilwoman. Okay.
Yeah, but
She's taken it to heights I never thought I could.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying is, that's why I want to see what are these sources, that we have that. We've had surveys that when information was traced back, it was kind of interesting how some of those surveys, the answers were coming from City Hall. Wait a minute, who went down the hallways and say, hey, you need to take this survey and this is the results we want.
I will give it to you that I do think there is a lack of trust in City Hall. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is not his
Oh,
doing.
that's not, no.
It's not his fault. We're taking it out on him. I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I think the issue is back here.
Oh, yeah. But, when somebody's doing things, I have worked in different situations where I knew what the CEO wanted. I knew what the CFO wanted. Right. But I had the integrity to say, this is what you need. That when I walked out.
Priority for me.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing is, yeah, you're right. We're in compliance. So what is the reason for it? Well, we'll get better. That's all I'm saying about it is, and then when I look at reports and I see action items that are not, we need to review, we need to do these things, that tells me what the mindset is.
My issue is the potholes. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have any specific questions regarding street sweeping, I'll be happy to. Sir?